that's the thing where I feel like I've changed the most is I'm very clear. I'm very centered. I'm very much in tune with my body, my mind, my spirit. I'm like, okay, God, I hear God more. Even when he's not answering, I know that he still hears me. And so I'm very okay with it. Before I'd be like, okay, God, why didn't you answer?
Right,
Come
right.
on, God. I need an outcome. Like, come on, we gotta go.
This episode is sponsored by Preciosa Foot Pads.
Welcome, welcome, welcome to another episode of Feel Good, the podcast. I'm your host, Malika Lee. And with me today, my guest is Maleah Jackson. Maleah Jackson. I'm coming in with that Randy Watson. Okay, I was like, where is that coming from? Okay, Maleah Jackson. Let me tell you all a little bit about her. We'll be talking about taking the leap of faith today. So, Maleah is originally from Seattle, like me. We also have the same alma mater. She is a proud graduate of an HBCU, specifically Spelman College, which is down in Atlanta, Georgia, if you're not familiar with it. She's a Jesus lover, business owner, of course, an beautiful African-American woman, if you can see her on the screen, caregiver, daughter, friend, mother. And she has worked in the public and private sectors, nonprofits, and is an entrepreneur. Her current company is her second entrepreneurial venture called Makari Consulting, which helps businesses identify and address their problems so their everyday work focuses on achieving their mission. Welcome, Maleah. So happy to have you.
Hey. Thanks for having me, girl.
So you all are in for a treat. We're gonna have some real talk about taking that leap of faith and leaving your job. So she and I both have had experiences with that, and we know a lot of people have made that transition in what has been termed or coined the Great Resignation in 2021. According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, over 47 million Americans voluntarily quit their jobs. So it was a mass exodus. And Maleah, my guest today, is one of the 47 million. So we'll be rolling up our sleeves and talking about some of the things that we don't talk about during that process of taking the leap. So with that, Maleah, why don't we start with just set us up before taking the leap? What was life like? What was the timeline? What was going on?
Yeah, so this is my third leap. And
it gets easier, doesn't it? After
maybe
maybe not. Okay.
I don't know. Life before was actually, I started this business 8 years ago, and I was working in that business. I started this business to help take care of family, all of that, and to have some control over my time and my life. And I found myself in a space where I needed to either really grow my business really rapidly or take on a job. And because it had kind of been part-time because I was taking care of my family. And so I took on a position in startup tech world. For all of startup tech people, it is work.
It's a grind. Yeah.
It is real work. And I'm not afraid of hard work, but I never gave up my business in that either. So essentially I had two jobs. And both businesses, the startup that I was working for and my company, started to grow around the same time, which was around the end of 2020, beginning of 2021. And things started to be like, oh, I'm working two jobs now. I went from working like 1.25 job to like 1.5, but then it was like, for real, this is two jobs. And so I was happy to be working with friends at the startup. Really happy to be making a difference in the healthcare side of tech. And I was really invested in their mission, but more invested in my own for my own stuff.
How many hours, because you were saying you're working two jobs. So like, give us a sense of how many hours were you putting in between the two?
I think at the height of it all, I think I told my doctor I was working somewhere around 65 hours, 65, 70 hours a week,
Mhm.
which is unsustainable.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
That's almost 2 full-time jobs, basically. Yeah.
yeah. And so I was, and that was like 7 days a week. That was not like,
Oh,
this is not like 5 days a week. No, this is 7 days a week. Both jobs are roaring 7 days a week.
wow.
And so, I never really quantified. I'm sure there were plenty of days where I literally worked 18, 20 hours. And so, and I say I told my doctor because as a result of working two jobs, my blood pressure started going through the roof.
Mhm.
And she was like, yeah, you can't do that. You're going to have to make a decision soon because this is
Yeah.
affecting your health. And I was like, oh, crap. So that's kind of where I was before I had to come to the decision, like, really, am I going to do this? What's going to happen? All of the questions started flooding in. Where would I give up my business? And I remember years ago, Roland Martin said, I will never give up my stuff for somebody else's. It
Oh,
was like, you always need to own your own. And I was like, that stuck with me, that hit me years and years ago. And I've decided I'm gonna do my own thing.
wow.
I gotta do that. Yeah.
Wow. So, okay. So, but they're like, I'm assuming, because I said I've taken the leap before. So then there's the knowing, like, okay, I got to do this. But then there's the when you do it. Usually there's a space, right?
It
In
was a
between
long
there.
space.
Okay. So walk us through that part of it.
It was long, right? In December of 21, I had to have a real surgery. And um I had, my sister was working with me for my consulting business, and I had taken some time. I was taking time off because I had the surgery from both businesses. And I came back first to my business. So I took like 3 weeks, came back to my first business, and then an extra week and went back to this startup. And my sister said in the first week that I returned to my business, she was like, you're like your regular self now. And I was
Mm.
like, what does that mean? You're your regular self. And she was like, we don't really like you
Mhm.
when you're working both jobs. Like, you're not your best. You're like very short. You don't have time for a lot of stuff. You're really good at making decisions, but like the coaching, the mentoring, like all of that is like non-existent, and your like normal spirit is gone.
Mm.
And my mom had said the same. It's like 6 months ago you changed. And I was like, oh, okay. So I'm hearing that, and I'm like, my blood pressure's through the roof. Okay, I feel really good having one job, and like that 1 week difference is like, okay. So that's like December 21.
When was the
Uh
doctor's appointment when she was like, sis, you can't keep doing this?
October of
Okay.
21.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I was like, okay. And then I had another doctor's appointment sometime like May or June of 2022.
Mhm.
And that's when my doctor was like, you work more hours than me. No.
Mm.
And so she was like, you gotta do something. And in that time, I had been really like, okay, God, should I leave? Should I leave? What
Mhm.
should I do? Okay, I know I'm gonna choose my business. So when should I leave? And it was never like a really opportune time to like
Yeah.
leave, the business. And so I was like, okay. And I really felt God being like, yeah, you need to go,
Mhm.
for multiple months before I actually decided to like put my resignation in, tell people I was gonna leave, like
Mhm.
all those things. So like summer of 2022, I basically knew that I was gonna leave. I just didn't know when.
Mhm.
And actually, summer of 2022, I had a very, very vivid dream that the HR person from the startup was like at my house. And I was like, I'm done. I quit. And
Oh.
on the calendar, it was like the 27th of a month. And I
Mhm.
was like, Okay, is that like June 27th? Is that July, October? What does that look like, God? So, and I think I really did hear God being like, you gotta go. Like, that's this month. And I was like, I ain't ready to go. No, God, are you sure?
Right. I need some evidence. I need some validation. Mm-hmm.
Send me the signs and wonders, God.
That's right.
Please. Yeah. So there was a lot of like going back and forth. So clearly I knew in December 21, I was not the same and I needed to make a decision. By June of 22, I knew that I was leaving. I hadn't made a decision as to when.
Okay.
And it took me until all summer, and I really kind of shifted my focus, and I was very scared. I had a kid that had just graduated high school in June of 2022. He's going to college. I don't know. He's got an 80% scholarship, thank God, to college, but that 20% is like $20,000. So what does that look like? Where does that money come from? And what am I going to do? I've gotten used to this travel lifestyle. I didn't want to give up my creature comforts, like all of those.
When did you even have time for the creature comforts? It sounds like you were working so much that.
I enjoyed my kind of detox was traveling and massages.
Okay.
Like, those were the things that I did to kind of make myself feel better. But half the time that I traveled, I was working. Because there's no 7-8 weeks of vacation, especially not when you own your own. So, and in startup life, when you're a very, very small staff, everybody has to be on at all times. And so, it was very, very difficult. And so I got my kid off to college in August, and God had made it so difficult for me to do both of these jobs. Like I was exhausted. All the time. It didn't matter if I slept 8 hours one night or not. I was exhausted, mentally, physically, spiritually exhausted. And by the time I left my son at college, I went on a little 3-week vacation, and I came back home and I was like, it has to be soon.
Yeah.
And I had been going through Bible study. Every lesson was about being resolute.
I thought you were going to say Exodus.
No, that would have been too clear, right? Get out. But it was just like making a decision, not overburdening yourself. Like you cannot serve two masters, like all of those things. And so what I found myself in was I got comfortable with my pay the way it was from 2 jobs. I like that. That looks nice. I think I want to do that. I want that life. But it was really unsustainable. And so I was kind of like, okay.
And what was the cost? That's the other part, right? Like it was a high cost for,
like I might not be here. Like I got real serious in that year time frame about what does my life insurance look like? What are my health insurance things? Like, what if something seriously happens to me? I got long-term care insurance. I got short-term, I got everything, right? I'm paying out of the nose for everything because I am like, I might not be here if I keep this pace up.
Wow.
And that's the point where I was like, you can't just kill yourself. That's crazy. That's nuts. So of course I waited like another 2 months and turned in my notice. And not only did I like turn in my notice, I didn't give like regular people notice. I was like, these are people that I've known forever. This is a company that I've been here from. The thought popping into my friend's head, I don't want to be like, I'm out, peace out. And so I was like, oh, like 8 weeks. I think we ended up with like it being somewhere like 5 weeks, but it was like a lot of transitioning to other people. I didn't want to leave them in a bind. It was like I was more concerned about them than about myself at that point. So it took until January of 2023 for me to be like for
Wow.
real gone.
That
That's
was a
a
long
long,
transition. Oh my
long time.
goodness. Wow. And especially for it to be your third leap, because, okay, so I've done two leaps. And I would say that the time, my first leap, good Lord, that was like years of that,
Mm,
of knowing that it wasn't the right space, of not, of just being
yeah.
fearful, not knowing. And so that one, I mean, I feel like my whole time at that job was the transition to get out, because
Mm,
I even knew in taking the job that I didn't think it was going to sustain me, but I was like, okay, I can do this for 10 years and rack up my
wow.
cash or whatever.
Yeah.
I didn't stay for 10 years. I think it was like 4.5. And then my next leap was shorter because I had taken the leap before, and I
Mm,
knew going back to like, because, I feel like definitely God, my spirit is telling me. And so it's just like, okay, I've gone through this before. So the second time it was like maybe 2 months
okay.
a transition. So I'm wondering, for you working through it, like tell us about, how did you allay those fears that were keeping you in that situation? What did you do to kind of make it a softer leap?
Yeah. I think this third leap was harder because I'm older. I had more
Um,
responsibility. I got a
mhm.
mortgage. I got college tuition. My mom and my grandmother moved in with me. I have responsibilities that are hard.
Yeah.
Um, you know, when I was 25, when I left for my first business, it was like immediate. I'm out. I'm
Okay.
done. I'm out. Nope, I'm not staying anywhere. And then the second time was like, it was necessitated. Like, you have to go, because
Mhm.
if you don't, you can't do the thing that you really want to focus on, which was my family at the point.
Okay.
And so this time, I think it was very, very hard for me to go like, I I've given up money. I'm going to give up a lot of money,
Mhm.
and I wanted to build until my business was about equal income
Mhm.
to my startup job. And so, but once I got there, I was like, ooh, I like these cushions. So I just settled in like a good couch, like, hey.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so I think that was the biggest fear, was like, that was one of the biggest fears, like, monetarily, what are we going to do? Because
Yeah.
we've gotten accustomed to this life. My son's gotten used to traveling more, not that we never traveled, we always did. And but it was just a different type of travel and how frequent and all of that. And so but
And
I
how
think
much
that,
leg room?
right. And
Yeah.
yes, yes, I am a fan of premium seats.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, that was one of the biggest fears. The absolute largest fear was, what if I fail again?
Mhm.
My first business, I mean, we did really well, but I lost the love for it.
Mhm.
And so it wasn't my priority. And so I just kind of let it go. I was like, here's some clients to whoever, here's, a little pay for my client list, but that's it.
Mhm. It was
Um,
consulting again? Was it
it
consulting?
was catering,
Oh,
actually.
catering, okay.
That was my very first business. I grew up with my grandmother being a caterer and a cake baker. And yeah, so I got into that world. And that's a lot of work, right?
Yes, it
So
is.
it's a
It
lot
is.
of physical work, but it's also like, it also trained me for what I started to do in my consulting business, which was like helping micro businesses and other small businesses figure out their structure, what you need to have in place to do the thing that you really want to do.
Mhm.
And so I really learned from that, and then all of my previous experience in corporate and government. But it was really hard to think like, I actually can't fail. Like,
Yeah.
this is a no fail situation. Like,
Mhm.
you cannot afford to do it.
Mhm.
So you gonna get in here and you're gonna do it like this is the only thing that you got going in the world,
Right.
and you've got to give 110% to it and
Mhm.
make it work.
Yeah.
And when I finally did, make that leap, that was what I did. I'm like, all right, I'm in it. I can transition all of this other time that I was giving to this other place to this business, and I can make this work.
Did you have, so like I've heard, was it NDRE or Oprah? They're like, okay, you got to have at least $10,000 in the bank, or you got to have, so what were those things to make the leap a little less traumatic or
Yeah.
scary? Did you have some kind of metrics, or like, okay, let me
Yep.
have these things in place first? And if so, what were they?
Yeah. So I had to make sure first, college tuition was stored away. Like
Okay.
that was gonna happen.
1 year's worth, 2 years worth?
That was just 1 year. As long
Okay.
as I got 1 year, for the next year, I could figure that out.
Got
Yeah.
you.
I'm like, I can hustle up on that.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I needed to make sure that I could pay my mortgage for 6 months. So I didn't want to be like, oh my gosh, what are we gonna do? I don't have this mortgage money.
Right.
And then also for my business, I took no salary for about 3 months.
Okay.
Because I wanted it to be there to cover the business expenses. And then if I did need a salary draw that was larger than my normal salary draw, that it was there, it was available. And so, so that was kind of the biggest thing. Like, I need to make sure I have all of our systems that we pay for at the business. All of that stuff is in the bank. College tuition is there, and then we can pay the mortgage for 6 months. I can make sure that we keep that 6 months kind of evolving.
Right.
So
That makes so much sense. So that's the financial, and also helps the emotional and psychological. What kind of support? Because you mentioned spiritual, like God is in your ear talking to you about it. What kind of, like, who did you tell? Because that, depending on the people around you, like when I was taking the leap, most people were employees, right? Like that was their main thing. There weren't a lot of entrepreneurs in my family and even among my friend groups. So it's like, I don't know if I want to tell them, because I'm already kind of emotionally fragile or scared. And so how did you move through that process? Who did you tell? What kind of emotional support did you have?
Yeah. So my cousin, I talked to her almost every day. Sometimes multiple times a day. And I was like, I'm going, girl. I gotta leave. I got a date. I'm gonna go. And she was like, you giving him 2 months? Oh my God. I'm like, well, I'm gonna do what I do. She was like, you nicer than me, because I would have been like, peace out. You get 2 weeks and I'm out. And like her, my sister, my mom, I think I told my dad too this time. The first time I got ready to make the leap, I was like, my dad was like, are you sure? Like, I had a government job that paid good money. I bought my first house, all those things. And my dad had retired from the fire department after 30 years. And then he had an entrepreneurial venture, right? So
Okay.
like, do that after you're established, that kind of thing. And at my first leap, my mom was like, go do what makes you happy. And I think my dad didn't have anything to say this time. And I think it's just, he's like, I've given up.
She's not gonna listen. She ain't learned yet.
Oh, what? And then my mom was the one that was like, are you sure you have a mortgage, blah, blah, blah. And for my mom, I just know, like, if I actually have prayed on it and I can be like, God said go, she's gonna be like, all right, I don't like it, but okay. I mean, I've always been that person where if God said go, I'm going. And he has always made a way. I mean,
Yeah.
I remember turning 30 and I had this whole trip planned. I was like, we going to do this on my 30th birthday, me and my friends. And my mom was like, how can you afford that? And I was like, God got it. Don't worry about it. And literally, I'm one of those people that has had like mysterious checks show up in your box, like insurance company refunds. When does an insurance company ever refund you money because you overpaid?
Never, except that one time, 2 times.
Except then. And so I was able to be like, Ma, like, no, God said go. I just gotta go.
Mm,
And
yeah.
so she was like, all right.
Here we go. Hold on. It's like a roller coaster ride. Let me hold on. Yeah.
And then she said, weeks later, she said, I got you.
Mm-hmm.
She's like, don't worry about it. Like, if you need anything, you need money, I got you. She's like, God has always made me your backup. And
Mm.
so I'm here. And so to have that, and then my whole Bible study group, because every week I was like, well, again, this question was about me leaving my job. So they were like, girl, when you gonna leave? We still
Right. We've been
talk
hearing
about
this
it.
for 8 months. Yeah.
Get out. So that was like the emotional support was like lots and lots of prayer. And then lots of people just around me being like, you got it. What you worried about? And then all of the people like I had built and worked in partnership with over the years through Makari Consulting was like, girl, this is what you were born to do. You love this stuff. You finally found what you really want to do in life. And it hadn't really dawned on me that this is what I wanted to do in life. But I was doing it in the community and doing it at work. And so I was doing it for free and doing it to get paid. And they were like, duh, this is what you're supposed to be doing. I was like, oh, light bulb.
Yeah.
Well, let's get to it then.
Right. Let's go. Let's
Yeah.
go. Yeah. Okay. So then you take the leap, right? And so now, like, what does life look like? Like your first full day after leaving and you're doing your own company, did you start calling people that maybe you had talked to but never really formed? Like, what did you start doing to help build up that salary again that you had just walked away from the startup?
You know what? I had already taken on a bunch of projects with some partners and some co-consultants. And so I had projects coming and I knew there were projects that were going to start up when I left or projects that were going to intensify after I left. And so I had that built up already. So
Okay.
I knew that, my first month I was going to make as much money as I had made when I was at the tech startup and the consulting business. I knew that money was coming.
Okay.
So, I mean, I'm so grateful and so thankful for all of the partners that we have in our business because I've worked with them for the last couple of years and it was almost like they were waiting for me to leave so that there were more things that we could do together or more projects that we could go after together. And so it was like I had already got help in the business. So I already had a project assistant hired. I already had these 2 core partners that were like, we got work for you. Like, let's do this RFP together. Let's do this, those kind of things. And so I didn't have to like do the extra work because I was already doing it all along. And I was preparing in the long transition to be out. And so I was like, just give me until, and really one of my business partners was like, so I'm gonna need you to quit.
Mm.
And she was like, what you gonna do? You gonna work there or you gonna work for yourself? Because this back and forth stuff is really not gonna work out. And like I'm turning down jobs because I want you to be available, but you are not available. You don't have time to do it. And so it was almost like God is like, the flood waters are stacked up back here, but all you got to do is step in. And so I was like, okay, well, I got to step in. I got to tap in. And so it was an easier transition for me than I think for most people. I had the hardest part for me was I just left this job that was guaranteed checks.
Yes.
And now I'm solely dependent on me to bring money in. But that's when like my faith had to kick in and be like, it's never been you.
Yeah.
And so it don't matter if you worked for a federal government, for a startup, or for yourself, it's never been you. It's always been God. And so it's like, okay, that's the point where I was like, okay, God, you always got me. I have evidence of this over the last 40 years of my life.
Right,
And
right.
so you always got me.
Yeah.
Let's go with it.
And not to get attached with necessarily the instrument, right? That God can use,
Yep.
that your income comes through. So sometimes because that seems more tangible, we can hold on to that versus trusting, okay, if I put this instrument down or let this go, God is still God and we'll find another source in another
Right.
way.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah. I mean, what they say all the time in church is you're so thankful for the gift, you forget about the giver.
Mm-hmm.
And it's
Mm-hmm.
like, that's the thing that I had to shift my focus, and I started to do things that I used to do. Like I have all these sticky notes at my workstation that are reminders of how God brings you through, how
Mm-hmm.
God provides, and that it's not me. And I have a friend that says, man, you made it, dog. And I'm like, man, I did not make nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
I'm always like, God is using me through me, he's working through me for something else. Because it
Yeah.
ain't for me. What I build every day is not for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm always thinking about what's the exit.
Mm-hmm.
God, where does this go? What is this being built for? And so that's where I'm focusing. That's where my focus is every day in my work.
We have to take a moment for this episode's sponsor, Preciosa. Spring is here. If you're like me, you've started cleaning out your closet, sweeping out cobwebs, and making room for the new. But what about cleaning out you, as in your body? Years ago, a naturopathic doctor I was working with suggested detox foot pads that help your body detox while you sleep. Well, I've tried many, and since then, my favorite so far is Preciosa foot pads. First, they are great quality and the price is right. Their products have natural and organic ingredients and are often less expensive than other brands that aren't organic. Also, I feel like I can see it working because of the icky goo when I take off the foot pads in the morning. Sometimes I don't sleep well, and I can say I did sleep better during the night after a few days of using them. What also sets them apart is great customer service. When there was a mix-up with my order, Jean was very kind and efficient and corrected it promptly. She even added a few extra samples of their other products for me to try. Don't just take my word for it. They have 4.2 out of 5 stars on Amazon with over 990 votes. Visit their website by clicking the link in the bio. You can thank me later.
You know, it's interesting. As I hear you say that, I often find that sometimes I don't get those types of answers. And I'm curious if you do. Sometimes I'll get the, like that nudge to do this. But then what I had to do, even with this podcast, I had so much anxiety starting this podcast. And I would take hours editing it because the perfection is, when I get anxious, sometimes it was like the perfectionist taking out every taking out every blah blah blah, just being like overly critical. And then it's like, I'm closing my eyes, hitting this, the publish button, scared, right? And of course nothing happens right after I hit the button. And I had to let go of my attachment to the outcome and just be very clear on the guidance and doing my part, because I don't have any control over, once I hit submit, how people respond to it. And so I'm wondering, when you're saying you're already thinking about the exit, like what your journey has been in that dance.
Yeah, I mean, God never tells you what exactly,
That's why I was like,
is
girl,
gonna
let me
happen.
know. Are you getting the memos? I'm not getting all of it. Yeah.
No. Not at all. I can only think really about one time where I went into something where God was like, and he didn't even tell me what the outcome was going to be, but he said, this is a short-term assignment.
Mm-hmm.
But God is beyond time. So I didn't know what short time, what was a short term look like. And it ended up being 2.5 years, which was kind of short term. For some people, they're like, that's a long commitment.
It's all relative.
Right. So I think I definitely not in what I'm doing. I don't get like, this is what it's going to be.
Mm-hmm.
I don't get that at all. what I get is when I'm working on stuff and where people are saying, oh, we really enjoyed that learning experience, or I didn't even think this way before. I never thought to ask questions. My immediate was just to react. Um, that's where I start to feel God like filling me with like peace of like, you were supposed to be there. You were supposed to do that. You were supposed to write this one thing. And so that's kind of the way that I live with him is like, I know, like, I would love to see the end. Like, I would love to know, God, are
We
you gonna
all would.
like take care of, my son's master's degree and his doctorate that he wants to pursue after undergraduate? Like, I would love to know that, but I know that every day that I can pay the light bill, the water bill, every day that I can stand up, walk on my own, every day that I can breathe in and out, that is a blessing from him. And I'm thankful for those moments, for the little things. I even have around my house, you will see little things on whiteboards or on sticky notes that say like, seek God in the margins, see him in everything. And that's just I got to do it because I have no control. And when we try to control things, that's when it goes left. So like me trying to control when I left was like miserable for me. I was like, you did that to yourself. You made yourself miserable. You took your blood pressure up a whole like extra 20 points on both sides. You're crazy. And when you leave, it's like, here it is. God's like, blood pressure down, you chilling, like you
Relief.
strong.
Yes. What because it's coming to mind a couple of things. One is that this taking the leap can apply to so many different areas. Like even sometimes being in a romantic relationship and that little voice is like, it's time to go. And sometimes, myself included, have stayed longer. And then it gets messier and it gets worse to the point where it's almost like you get pushed out, right? Like that's what even happened my first job. And so I'm curious now, with where you are looking back and having this experience, how have you changed and how has it impacted, the next time you're going to have to take the faith? What learnings have you packaged up that you can call on the next time something comes up?
I do feel very different. I feel very different. I feel more in tune with my body. I feel more in tune with my mind. I did not realize, and I told the CEO of the startup when I left, because I had a long transition, right? So there was a couple of weeks where I had way less work to do, right? And so I could actually be present. And that was the thing that people didn't like, because I had been present for all those years. And then all of a sudden I was not. Okay. I was always focused on getting something done, moving to the next thing, moving to the next thing. And so I feel very different. I mean, I've had to figure out stuff now and be like, am I going to go do this thing? Like there's other business opportunities on the horizon. Am I going to go do this thing? What does that look like? And it's not a 2-year process to say, yes, we're going to do that. And it's me being very clear, like in my body and in my mind of like, okay, I can do that. Or in the middle of doing something, being like, nope, can't do that. I cannot do it. It is not benefiting me in any way. I am starting to spin. And that was the thing that I said. It felt like I was on, those childhood, like merry-go-round kind of things, like the ones that you spin at the park. I felt like I was on that, but I was in the center. So I didn't really know I was on it until I got off. And then there were like residual effects of like the spin. Yeah. And so now I feel like I'm not spinning anymore. And how beautiful it is to stand still and be able to see what's in front of you. And so that's the thing where I feel like I've changed the most is I'm very clear. I'm very centered. I'm very much in tune with my body, my mind, my spirit. I'm like, okay, God, I hear God more. Even when he's not answering, I know that he still hears me. And so I'm very okay with it. Before I'd be like, okay, God, why didn't you answer?
Right,
Come on,
right,
God.
right.
I need an outcome. I need an outcome. Like, come on, we gotta go. We gotta do this thing. And I
Right.
need you to help. So,
Right, right. You got me or nah? Yeah, do
right.
I do it or not? Yeah, yeah. And what I'm hearing then from that is like a deeper level of peace.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is one of the things that faith can make available is, a level of peace. So if someone's listening right now and they're not ready, like they might be on the edge looking over to take the leap, what are some things that come to mind to just share or to encourage or for them to think about?
So actually, I had this conversation. I've had this conversation one time a month since I left,
Mm,
which is very interesting,
yes.
with people at different events. And what I have said is, first off, make sure that you absolutely love the thing that you're leaving for. Because the worst thing is to jump from one fire to the next fire. It's like, jump out the fire and jump into some cool, calm waters,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it might have moments of, heavy waves and chaos, but that there will be tranquility and peace that comes at some point. The calmness will return. So you have to absolutely love the thing that you're leaving for. I think the other things that I would say was plan. Be prepared. I mean, you can't do stuff all willy-nilly. Like, make sure you're not going to be on the streets. Like, make sure that you have a plan in place, and make sure you plan for the worst situation possible. Like, not that, business will slow down. What if you have absolutely no customers or no one interested in your product for 6 months, a year? Will you still do that thing? Will you still be invested in that thing? And so, I'm like, I'm going to do this regardless. I've been doing it. I'm going to do this work regardless. And I think the last thing is to bring people along with you, whether they work for you or mentor you or sponsor you. And I haven't had many mentors. Let's be very clear. I did not come up in an era of like, these are the mentors and you follow, these are the people that you call, or these are the people that are going to advocate for you. I didn't have that sensibility, and I didn't have that knowledge to that the world worked like that. Right. And so bring people alongside you that will support you, but make sure they're not yes people.
Yep,
Make sure they are people that will challenge you and be like, are you sure? Or I believe that you can do this, but have you thought about this? Just people that will help sharpen you. Right. And I think those are the three biggest things,
Yeah.
Just love what you do, plan, and bring the right people with you.
Yeah. Very wise. Very wise. What's coming to mind to just put out there in this conversation is, I think, when you and I spoke before, a couple weeks ago, I was telling you that I picked up Cash Flow Quadrant again by Robert Kiyosaki. I read it like, 15 years, if not more. And I swear I was reading it like it was the first time. Have you ever picked something up and it's like, oh, I don't even remember this part. And one of the things that struck me, he was just like, regardless of where you are in the continuum of how much money you make, he was like, money is an emotional thing. And he was like, whether somebody is wealthy or whether somebody isn't, it can still stir fear up. The difference is not that the feeling of fear, because everyone has that. It's how do you channel it or what do you do with it? And he was like, for some people, when they feel afraid, they try to cling on to the sense of security, which, like you're saying, you got the check every couple. And he was like, and on the other side of, I'm not going to get into the quadrant because it'll take too long, but he was like, on the other side, those that are like the business owners, the Bill Gates, the what's the guy from Apple that passed away?
Steve Jobs,
right? He was like, on that side of the quadrant, when they feel the fear, it's about freedom.
Yeah.
versus the security. And so I think that it's so important to voice, and people are becoming more transparent now that we all are dealing with things. We all are going to have fears. Don't think just because someone has done something that they didn't have to deal with the fears, and take the leap in spite of.
Right.
And sometimes I used to think like, well, once it calms down, once I'm not afraid, then it'll be time. And it's like, no, boo, that's not how it works.
Not at all, right? And people always ask me, the social climate today, like, when you are angry, like, what do you do? And my thing is to channel it into action. I do the same thing with fear. It's like, it's either going to keep me where I am, or I have to channel it into action. And so you either let it debilitate you, or you let it free you, and so you gotta move and do in the middle of that fear. In the middle of lots of emotions, there's a lot of times where you need to channel it into action, results, or whatever it is that will bring you some sense of like, okay, I did something with that. Like me, when I get upset or like I'm confused or frustrated, I actually have to do movement. I have to like get out, go do something, even if it's like I've many a time in the middle of the night have hopped in my car and just got on the highway just because I need to get out. And the act of driving is like a release of energy into the car. And so you have to figure out how you release those things, how you free yourself from the emotion that is on you. And fear is a one that can kill you, or it can liberate you.
Right. It could kill your dreams. You know what I mean? Like fear, what they say, there's so many treasures in the graveyards because people were too afraid to act on those dreams. And I read somewhere, heard somewhere, it was like, use those fears when they come up, like, especially if they're specific. Sometimes there's just the general anxiety, right? But then sometimes it's like the fear of, how am I going to pay my mortgage? How am I going to, like you're talking about, some very real tangible, because it's tied to survival. And it's like, use that fear to say, okay, make a plan around that. Okay, I'm afraid about my mortgage, so let me start saving for 6 months, so use that fear actually as kind of a guiding post of where to do the actions like you're talking about. I think that's also been helpful. So it's like you can start making a plan around what those fears are and let them inform you of where to go and what to do to support that leap.
And like you said, it's in everything, not just in your career, not just in your finances, in your relationships. I let a lot of people go at the end of 2022. And I had conversations with them like, we can no longer be in relationship, or we can no longer be in relationship in the way this relationship has been. And let me tell you why. And let me tell you what I need for this relationship to move forward. I mean, that works in platonic relationships, love relationships. You have to be clear. It's the same principles, right? You have to be clear on what you need and where you're going. And you have to be clear with the people that you're going with. And so it's like, in relationships, I'm like, that's not benefit to me. Like I had a relationship one time where it was like, he did not want to argue with me. He didn't want any kind of conflict because he said, well, you're just going to believe your way is right anyway. And I told him, I said, we can no longer be in relationship because your fear of me not changing actually hinders me from changing. It doesn't give me an opportunity to see anything differently. So I can't grow. I can't learn. So you've put me in a box. I'm going to stay in that box if I stay in relationship with you. And so it's the same principles in business. If you're a person that says you support me, you can't say yes to all my ideas. You have to ask me questions like, is this going to work for the next 5 years? Is this going to work for the next 6 months? Have you thought about the long-term impacts of this? Like, I need you to be like, you know what? Actually, that's not a good look. In community, this is what it is. I need to know that.
Yeah.
So we can't be in relationship that way.
Ooh, and this goes back to the primal, and this is why it can be so fearful. Even why people avoid conflict is because it can bring up really that fight or flight, like our primitive survival. Same thing with our jobs. It's like primitive food on the table, roof over your head. And as Homo sapiens, we're social beings. We're not wired to be able to live alone. So letting go of those relationships can stir up those same fears. And I went through a very similar thing as well during my second leap, where it was my spirit was like, not that anybody was wrong necessarily, but the best way I can describe it is that it was like I was an instrument and I was fine-tuned. And so the instruments that I resonated with before my fine-tuning, after the fine-tuning, it wasn't resonating anymore.
Yeah.
And it was an interesting thing because it was like I didn't have something tangible that I could say to that person of why our friendship was shifting. They had done nothing wrong.
Right.
And that was one of the first times going back to, like, when we stay in situations too long, right? Then we have all this evidence.
Yeah.
But it was like I was on the forefront of it before it went left. My spirit was like, no. And so it's like, ooh, how do I move with that? When I haven't, it's not even to a place of having something go wrong yet for me to say it's time for me to let this go.
Yeah.
And I think that was one of the most difficult situations because I had not been through that before. I didn't even have language. They had done nothing wrong, but it was still time to let them go.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I'm wondering, for me, I had a space then of like where I let go. It was a lot of people in my inner circle that I had to let go. It wasn't even like, this is how we have to move forward. Okay, so I see your face. I see your face. So that's a whole other leap, right? It's like, where are my people? I've let these people go. Where are my people?
Oh,
so
yeah.
What was your leap with that? And then we'll just wrap it on up after this. But I think that this is part of the conversation.
There's a colleague of mine that's like, every time we go somewhere, he says, tell about how you fired your whole family. And in my first business, I was like, oh, I can hire family, blah, 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 blah. And they were horrible. They were terrible. It was like, oh my gosh. A lot of them were older than me. They didn't want to listen to me. I'm like, this is my stuff. You not going to listen to me. I'm the one cutting checks. All y'all got to go. I had to do that. I mean, I have also I've done it again, a bunch of other times too, where I would say when I knew that even close people, my family, they know, she will be like, peace out, I'm done. If it is not something that if the relationship is not going to benefit me, or even it doesn't have to be like a real, like, I'm going to get something from this. It's just, if it's dragging me in a direction I don't want to go, I will not be in a relationship with you. I'm not going to take you on as a client. You're not going to be my friend. You're not going to be my boyfriend. None of that. I am not willing to compromise someone said this to me while I was leaving. It was like, this doesn't line up with your core values.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so if what you are doing does not line up with your core values, how do you keep going? Either it's going to change you, or you're going to change it. But a lot of times we as people want to make other people comfortable. And so we're not willing to stay in a place of like, this is who I am. I'm not compromising. I'm not compromising. I'm not compromising. And you can do that for so long. But when stuff keeps pelting you, it's like glass. If you throw enough pebbles at the glass, it will break. And so you got to be very clear. Like, I don't want any parts to do with that. You're like, I don't want to do that in my career, in my business relationships, in my family relationships, in my friendships. I don't want to be that person. So I recently listened to Amanda Seales did her podcast, Small Doses, the Side Effects of Integrity.
Mm.
And you have to have, what is integrity look like to you?
Yeah.
Like, and I was always brought up with the idea that integrity is doing what's right when no one's looking.
Mm-hmm.
And so they started to talk about that, or like doing the thing, not doing the thing now because it doesn't benefit you later.
Mm.
And so getting really clear about that. And so, you know, I think we all have to be in a space where we're very, very clear in mind and body and spirit on who we are, what we stand for, and what we're willing to take. And then that helps inform your decisions moving forward, whether they be business, whether it's family, whether it's friendships, and whether it's how you walk down the street, what you put on, it, whatever it is, you know, those are the things that we have to be clear about. And in taking the leap, it is so important that you are clear about what you're willing to do for whatever the leap is that you're going to take. If for business, am I willing to be in business with these people, even though I know they might be a little shady? I am not. I always tell people, I don't want the IRS calling me for nothing. I don't want a letter. I got a cousin that works for the IRS. I don't want you showing up. I got my 4 and 7 and indefinite records, you know, those years of records, but I don't want you to show up. That is a level of anxiety inducing activity that I would rather forego. So there are some people that I can't be in business with because you gonna have the IRS at your door, and then they're gonna be looking for me because you paid me. And no, I'm good.
I feel you on that. I have a friend that comes to mind right now. Like,
no,
it's not gonna work.
We're not gonna be able to do business together. I'm sorry, you know.
Yeah.
So
and what that, I feel like all of these things coming back to the faith part of it, it's like sometimes desperation supersedes faith, right? Like desperation and fear are like siblings, cousins, because if you're desperate, whether it's to be in relationship, right? Like there's a belief more in scarcity. Or, you know what I'm saying? Like, I have to hold on to this job. I have to hold on to this friend. Even if they're dogging you out or whatever, versus trusting and having the faith that if I let go, something else will show up. And I've been in both places, and I know it's really, really hard, like white knuckling. I know it's really hard sometimes when you're white knuckling something to realize that, baby, you'll be okay.
You'll be all right. You are going to be all right. I can tell you, my friends always clown me. They're like, how many jobs you got now? Because I was always that person that was like, I'm going to be integral, but while I'm making this leap, I'm going to do everything else to make sure that I don't fall into like that real scarcity mindset. Like there's too much opportunity out here. I'll go drive DoorDash. Don't get it twisted. I drove for Uber and Lyft back in the day when I first started this business. I drove for Uber and Lyft to make up the differences. Or when I wanted to go on a trip, I would drive even more because I was like, this is my vacation money and I like my travel. As y'all could tell, I like my travel.
Right.
So like I'm like, I could go do that. I could always bake some cakes and sell that. I have talents and gifts and wonders that people don't all have. And I'm willing to utilize and implore all of them until the main thing that I know is going to be the reason why I am here and why I am effective in community and in whatever spaces I'm in. Until that thing picks up, I'm going to exploit every other talent that I got until that thing hits.
I think that's a mic drop moment. My spirit is like, that's it. That is the period to this conversation. Period to the conversation. Yes, that was it right there. So, Maleah, if people want to find you or do business with you and solicit your support from your consulting, Makari Consulting, how can they find you?
Yep. So Makari Consulting, our website will be up in May, our backup in May, because it was trash, y'all. Y'all would have been clowning me and be like, I'm not doing business card looking at that website. So it will be up as MakariConsulting.com. You can find me on LinkedIn, Maleah Jackson, or Makari Consulting has a webpage on LinkedIn as well. Just look for me. MaleahJackson.com will be up in May 1st as well. So you can find me. I'm out here.
All right, she out here. Well, I want to just say, Maleah, we haven't known each other very long, but I was like, she's one of my people. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like, letting people go. It's like, when you find another person, when the new you, the butterfly, it's like, oh, you recognize another butterfly.
Yep.
When you see one. So I want to thank you for accepting my invitation to be on the podcast, for sharing your wisdom and experiences. It has been a joy. And to all of you listening, thank you for taking the time. Many blessings. And until the next time, keep on doing you and making sure that you make choices that are self-honoring and that feel good. Bye for now.